Okay. Barrel or nah?
Let's do it.
Publicly endorsing a presidential candidate.
Nah. I think it's totally lost any of its original purpose. I think, back in the day, it was important for the New York Times or whatever, or, big papers of record to, and I don't know that it was important for them, but it made sense for them to go on the record, right? Saying, this people, you like us, we're doing the hard yards for you. Now it's just silly. Like, everyone has their own opinion. There's so much news out there. Everybody's just micro researching their own weird stuff in their own weird feed. So to have, Surfer Magazine, clearly it's silly, to endorse a candidate, but New York Times, any of them, it's silly, I think.
So the Surfer Magazine, for the first time in their 60 years, endorsed Biden and Kamala Harris. The day before that, the staff was all furloughed. Why do you think it's silly for them?
I mean, I just think who cares? Like, everybody, you're putting your brand on, this is the candidate for you, is just asinine.
I don't think they said this is the candidate for you. They were saying,
sure,
if we want, like, as surfers, we have a responsibility towards environmental kind of protection. And that's why we're supporting.
I get it. But I suppose I think that, if your intent is really to get people to vote for Biden and Harris, there's ways to go about that. I think what you do is exacerbate and alienate it probably does more harm than good to the actual candidate. I don't think very many people read Surfer's post and think, you know what? That's right. That's true. I'm going to vote Biden Harris because they represent, my whatever as a surfer. I think what you do is get a lot of people who say, screw you for trying to tell me what to think.
I thought long and hard about exactly what you just said. I don't think that there was anybody who was so offended. There was tons of comments of people hugely offended by it. I don't think any one of them stops reading Surfer if they were reading Surfer prior.
I think they
stops following if they were following.
I think
prior.
They lost thousands upon thousands upon thousands of followers.
Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I know for a fact they did. Like, it was the social media director, I think, was profoundly disturbed by the precipitous drop.
Okay. Now is a more divisive time than ever.
Yeah.
Firstly, so it's really surprising to me that people get that triggered by that statement that the Surfer Magazine made. And I'm saying this agnostic of my own views. I'm just saying, like, how could that trigger you? But that's the times that we're living in, where that it is that divisive. So that's kind of bothersome to me that people get that triggered by somebody just having a different view than them.
Of course.
But I do think that they do have some level of influence. So them making the statement, I do think actually influences. Look, if somebody is just maybe apathetic, maybe agnostic, maybe on the fence, and they have 5 of the publications that they follow, maybe it was the New York Times and Surfer Magazine or whatever, all endorsing something, how could that not influence them in some way? If they go, wow, these various things that I follow and that I appreciate and like all feel this way about something, maybe I should consider feeling that way too.
I mean, I think there's probably 4 people in the United States that way. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody, all the polls, not that the polls are, right. Yeah, whatever with the polls, but I think that most people are fairly made up. I think the margins of people not made up is so tiny. And
at this point, yeah.
And so I get Surfer, if they wanted to make a loud clang, then that's great. But if they actually really wanted to get or help get Biden and Harris elected, I think there would have been and could have been far better ways to do it than an Instagram post. I bet they turned more people off or got more people violently angry. Totally silly to get violently angry about that.
Right.
Than they did makes one person stop and say, well, I didn't think about it that way.
Mutual friend of ours was texting me, ranting about, I want surfing just to be fun. So regardless of who they endorse, they should not make a political statement because surfing is my reprieve from all of those things.
I mean, I completely disagree with all of
Me
that.
too.
Like,
Me too.
Everything is everywhere. Religion, politics, it's all everywhere now. And to try to keep stuff blocked off, I think you just lose. I mean, Beach Grit again. We had our, the vice presidential debate up last night, comment live, where if we can't talk about stuff here in the fun place, I think we can talk about it more enjoyable and more enjoyably than by mushing all our food onto one plate. I'll keep doing that. I'm refusing to. Surfing is a place to talk about politics, and just don't be such a triggered baby all the time.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
I think that it is the place to talk about it, but it's not the place to shout at each other and flip each other off about it. It's the place to have dialogue and debate about it.
Sure.
So it's fully okay to incorporate those two things. And I also like the idea of that we all care now.
Yeah.
We didn't care 10 years ago. And so we should care. You should care who's running the country. So I think that I grew up with a certain level of apathy in regard to politics because I felt like it never really affected my life.
Sure.
And maybe now, just as you get older and you're paying taxes, you start to care. But this is a particularly, everybody cares at this point because of kind of the absurdity of a lot of the show that we've seen. Anyways, so you're not going to publicly endorse a candidate?
No.
On Chas Smith as a brand is not going to publicly endorse a candidate. Because your wife takes the opposite stance.
My wife definitely takes the opposite stance, and great for her.
She's eager to tell.
Very eager.
And to try to sway influence.
Great for her. I know that if I was going to endorse somebody, again, it would be very much worse for that person. Like, so if I was going to endorse, I'd probably endorse the opposite person that I was going for.
Yeah.
Just knowing that I'm going to be a toxic cancer on any one of their campaigns.
People do the opposite of what you do.
Yeah.
All right. Barrel or nah, taking a doctor's advice.
This is a good one. I'm going to say this is a blanket. Like, I either have to take a doctor's advice 100% of the time or 0% of the time.
Yeah. I mean, this is clearly related to a lot of news stories. We're all taking doctor's advice ever since this COVID outbreak. And it's kind of come to a point with the president this last week as he's contracted COVID. But yes, it's a blanket statement.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no doctor's advice for me. If I have to have one or the other, I feel like I've got a pretty good sense of what's going on.
Until you get sick.
Sure, of course. And then it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? I mean, you could take all your doctor's advice. Oh, okay, I totally appreciate doctors. Love doctors doing the Lord's work out there. Very smart people. But I also think that they're myopically focused oftentimes on anymore. There's not just a GP or a general practitioner is pretty rare. Everybody is hyper focused on their specialties. And so you have all these people who are hyper focused on a specialty where so much of life is about stepping back and seeing the big picture. That's where I think medicine has gone a little haywire in its hyper specialization. And then also this feeling that doctors know everything. So if a doctor says something, then that automatically is correct and true. Even if the doctor has only been ever focusing on this one little thing for a long time and has no idea what context that goes in.
Stepping back from the microscope helps.
I mean, and I wish so bad that our health system just had, was way more general, right? Like that it was, and also let's get weird, like get some kinesiologists in there and some, whatever, chiropractors, all the wackos, like mix it all up together. I think, I am not a fan of industrialized medicine knows best. So
our system is so broken that it's hard to not answer this question through the lens of what you and I experience. And in regard to your hyper specialized doctors, I had a buddy 1 month ago get a rotator cuff surgery. Surgery went well. Came home, he started getting this little rash. And the rash got significant, spread down his arm, started bubbling into boils, like blisters. And he's taking photos, sending them to the dermatologist, sending them to the surgery center that did his thing. Ultimately, everybody was saying, go talk to the surgery center, said, go talk to the dermatologist. Dermatologist said, go talk to the surgery center.
Yeah.
Everybody was pointing him different directions. And each day it was getting worse. He ultimately ended up at Hoag and spent multiple nights there. I think 2 or 3 nights.
Did he have a staff or something?
It was, it was like staff. It wasn't staff specifically, and I forget what it was called. But if I showed you pictures of this allergy, your mind would be blown.
Yeah.
It was disgusting and life-threatening.
Yeah.
And Hoag, they got him in, and I mean, he could not get somebody, and he has wealth, he has great access, and he could not get admitted. He went to a different hospital. They kind of gave him the runaround, and ultimately it all became, we don't want to be liable.
Yeah.
This wasn't our problem, so we don't want to intake you because then we'll be liable for somebody else's problem.
Crazy.
And Hoag, thankfully, is the best of the best. And they basically, not only treated it, they fixed it. They identified what the allergy was so that he can avoid it in the future, all that sort of stuff. But we really had to analyze it and go, imagine if you didn't have all of the access and resource that he had. You end up dying.
I mean, it's crazy. That's why, knock on wood, like every day I'm happy just to, try not to get sick, but I truly, and I felt this way my whole life. I've always rather if something's going to happen to me, I prefer to be overseas, even Egypt and stuff. Like I remember getting stitches in Egypt or spending a week in a hospital in Jordan and just thinking like this would have broken me back home.
Yeah, here's your bill for $82 or whatever the number is that you can afford to pay for the work that we did.
And for like a real general, I had amoebic dysentery in Jordan. Like they knew it's not like it's super specialized. They knew what to do. I was on IV for 7 days. I think the bill, 7 days in the hospital, I think my bill was $400 or $500.
Right.
Like
exactly
where, stitches in Egypt, like 30, it was like $23 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like
I talked to friends of my parents who are retirement age who go down to Baja to get dental work done.
Sure.
And the doctors who are working down there live in San Diego. They go over the border to do their dental work because they know getting paid $100 for a cleaning cash is better than charging $800
to the
in the
insurance.
US to the insurance that takes 6 months to get paid.
Yeah.
And in the end, I only get $120 out of the insurance that I billed $800 for. Yeah, and there's just endless examples of all of that stuff. But the flip side of that is in terms of taking advice from a doctor, these doctors are specialists that have studied something for 40 years and they've seen 10 to 20 patients a day about this thing for 40 years. And then somebody comes and asks them for advice and they can identify it clear as day instantly. And then that person who gets the advice from them goes, yeah, but I also looked it up on the internet and the internet told me this opposite thing.
Yeah.
And the doctor's just shaking their head going, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Except how neat, that's the thing. Like if something is something is open and closed or
Cut and dry.
But I think very rarely are ailments so clean, right? I mean, if you break a bone, you go in, you get an x-ray, bada bing, bada boom, set it, cast it, you're done, right? But if you're like, just have a general malaise or feel bad or, where do you even start, right? Like that's where I think people get, or that's where I am always like, I don't even want to begin because who do you go to?
Well, so you and I know our bodies and we think like, well, I'm not going to take the doctor's advice because I know best because it's always only been these general malaise that I can connect to either my diet or not getting exercise or somebody coughed on me and they had a cold, whatever. As soon as you get cancer, you take the doctor's advice.
Yeah. But do you?
You take multiple doctors' advice. I get multiple opinions.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything about cancer. I don't know how to cure my own cancer. Like those are the things that I would take advice for.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger issue that you and I have identified is that we're distrusting right now of doctors. And that's the larger public sentiment too, is when you hear the doctor in regard to COVID, when you hear doctors come out on public platforms and start discussing, our immediate question is, who's funding this?
Yeah.
Who do they work for? What political party are they associated with?
For sure.
And we run it through all those filters. So doctors have lost a lot of public trust.
I think experts in general have
Yes,
lost a lot of public trust.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's problematic.
Yep.
We need to get back to a place where we're able to trust. And we also, in terms of people we don't trust, politicians are at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Sadly, lawyers are number 2. Doctors fall kind of lower than that on the list, but this is a sad, sad reflection of where we're at.
It's true.
And even enforcement, like police enforcement, we don't trust anymore.
No.
You know, like
don't trust nobody anymore.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Trust is gone.
Totally. Okay, so
I'm not
taking a
trusting.
doctor's advice? No. Barrel or not, sending your kid to boarding school.
Oh, I'm so barrel.
Really?
I mean, the idea of it for sure, especially if like a European boarding school where they go and they, get refined in some way that, yeah, I mean, not for a elementary school or even junior high, but I think if
Teenage years.
yeah, if my child, like if there was some school somewhere that was a boarding school and she was into it, I'd be so down with it.
So it's funny, boarding schools played a prominent role in our youth. Like lots of movies came out where the
Yeah.
kid went away to boarding school. I feel like I heard stories of friends going, like acting out and they had to go to military school or something. This is a news story this week. Paris Hilton is trying to have a boarding school that she went to shut down because she says that their practices there were
Inhumane?
inhumane. Yeah, basically. Which to me, it just sounded like they were applying discipline to her.
Yeah.
And her version of discipline felt like it was a human rights offense.
Paris.
Of course, you know, but the fact that this even came up in the news, I was like, man, I haven't heard about a boarding school in 20 years.
Well, I got you another one that just came up. Apparently, Jeffrey Epstein gave a ton of money to a boarding school up in Michigan somewhere. And yeah, like, so, the creepy connection, the grooming of young people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Yeah, boarding schools twice.
I was thinking, as I thought about all those examples of boarding schools, it was only ever to give kids the discipline that the parents weren't able to enforce.
Yeah.
And I think that it's probably, first of all, they're expensive. So it means that the parents have some level of means, which probably means they're working hard. So they're not in the house, which is why the kid never got the discipline. So I'm anti-boarding school. Just based on that assessment, I'm thinking your kids are your priority. Stay home, discipline your kid. I have a puppy now, so I'm an expert on raising other things. Enough discipline and consistency will net you the results that you want.
But I suppose when I think of boarding school, I think of an arts boarding school, right? I think of them providing something that could not be provided at home. Like you're dancing, 8 hours a day with the best instruction. You're basically living, sleeping, and eating this thing. And if my child is passionate about something to that degree, then I think boarding school, I'm not just talking about a school. I'm talking about like a specialized boarding school.
So that's different. I think if your kid has a proclivity towards dance and can become a ballerina and you can send them to a school that, then certainly do that.
Yeah. That's what I was talking about. I'm not talking about school.
Okay.
Who cares about school?
I just think a boarding school is always discipline related for some reason in my head. And maybe it isn't. And maybe some of it is also academic. Like if you want to get into Oxford, you should go to this boarding school.
Did you ever what about like the Dead Poets Society? You never wanted to be part of a hoity-toity, like
I didn't
dress up for dinner, go walk to the commons, shuffle through the fall leaves with your male friends.
It's so far removed from the way that I was raised. That was never an option. Like public school was the only option.
Yeah.
And then getting into, I was like the first person in my family that actually got a 4-year degree from college. So there was no thought about Ivy League versus private school versus state school versus anything else. It was just, if I went to, my dad was going to pay for college no matter where I went, which was a huge advantage over everybody else that had come from our family. And so that was the best case scenario. But no, I had no thoughts of any of those.
Didn't want to go.
It wasn't even in my awareness.
What about like Scent of a Woman?
What part of that was?
Remember, that's where he goes to boarding school.
I don't remember that.
But
part
he's
of the
like
movie.
poor. And so all the rich kids are going skiing on vacation and he can't because he's poor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope. Never had any of those
Yeah.
thoughts in my head.
Looks good
I
to
also
me.
wasn't academically inclined.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I feel like I was intelligent. I just wasn't academically inclined.
Surf.
But in hindsight, I wish that I was. And also, I'm not against it for my own kids.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't send them there for disciplinary reasons. But if there
saying.
was a private school where like they do get better education,
Sure.
better access to opportunity when they get out, I would absolutely consider it.
I think only the arts for me.
Okay.
Only about dance, singing, music,
Yeah.
painting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Barrel.
On an artistic
Okay.
boarding school.
You're going Barrel on boarding school. I'm going Nah.
Yeah.
And I definitely think Paris Hilton needs to toughen up.
She does.
That's the result of all of this is Paris Hilton. Whatever, by the way, basic discipline from my youth is now viewed as a
Torture.
fireable offense
I mean, it's torture.
from authorities.
It
Yeah,
is
which is insane.
My goodness.
This is not a good thing.
yeah. That's
Definitely.
why we're all triggered snowflakes.
Now I feel like I need to send everybody needs to go to boarding school.
Yeah.
I changed my mind.
Yeah. Toughen up.
Everybody should go.
Buttercups.